Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Haunting, The Horror on Rue Lane by L.I. Albemont, narrated by Teri Schnaubelt. Glendower. I can call spirits from the vasty deep. Hotspur. Why, so can I, or so can any man, but will they come when you do call for them? Act 1. Henry IV, Scene 3, Line 1. Prologue. The prisoner will stand for sentencing. The judge looked down at her husband, who rose, standing awkwardly in handcuffs and shackles. Sarah leaned forward and clutched the back of the seat in front of her. Here, each day, the first week of the trial, she agonized over every charge, every witness that struck blows at his integrity and judgment. She believed in both until detailed testimony emerged of trips to Aruba with Kelly, a co-worker he had never mentioned. Kelly, tall, tanned, and what her mother would have called floozy blonde, cooperated with the feds in exchange for immunity. After that humiliating afternoon, she stayed away, focusing on selling the few things she owned that the feds had not seized. Despite that, her face appeared in newspapers and at times on local television, or so she had been told. She stopped watching television and reading the paper soon after the arrest. She was here today to see how this ended, to see if the frozen feeling that encased her would go away. Reporters shouted at her to look their way, but she hurried up the steps of the courthouse, avoiding the icy patches left by the weekend snowstorm. Wearing a black skirt and boots, black reefer coat buttoned up against the cold, she wanted the world to forget her. She looked waif-like in the slightly too large outfit, and the dark sunglasses were glamorous on a small, heart-shaped face. It felt strange to be out in public again. Her husband's financial schemes had defrauded the pension fund for city teachers and firefighters, leaving them with no retirement plan, and outrage had been vehement. Her husband's attorney had advised taking precautions against angry victims, so she went into hiding, grocery shopping at night, never going to restaurants. When her boss, Phil, recommended a leave of absence, she acquiesced, knowing the publicity was not good for the small property development company she had loved working for during the past 3 years. 2 weeks ago, after she made the decision to move away, her co-workers gave her a going-away lunch. Eve and Sharon cried, and everyone promised to keep in touch, but she was sure she saw secret relief on Phil's face. It hurt to realize that he considered her a liability now, but that was exactly what she would be until time erased the town's memory. Sean now wore the standard-issue orange prison jumpsuit, a painful contrast to the tailored suits he had worn throughout the trial. In spite of her determination to remain detached, her heart ached for him, imagining the humiliation he must be feeling right now. Some tiny, conjugal, sympathetic spark must still exist between them, because he turned and their eyes met just as she slipped through the door and sat down in the back of the courtroom. The judge now finished reviewing the counts.
Mr. Faust, in view of the particularly widespread and damaging nature of your crimes, this court imposes the maximum penalty of 7 years for each count, with each sentence to run consecutively for a total of 28 years. Restitution paid from seized assets will continue. Court will be in recess until 1 p.m.
He banged the gavel.
All rise,
the bailiff intoned. Everyone stood. Sean and his attorney talked quietly for a few moments. Then the bailiff approached the table. Sean said something, and the bailiff glanced at Sarah, then shook his head in response. Sean looked back at her before he shuffled out, head down. Sarah found with surprise that she was crying and sat back down, rummaging through her purse for a tissue. How could he have done this? defrauded investors and stolen the life savings of hundreds of people, destroying their lives just as he had destroyed hers. She wiped her eyes, then blew her nose, and the tears stopped. Her purse sagged open, and she smiled a little when a small, foldable road atlas with a highlighted route wandering down the East Coast slid out. Time to go. Chapter 1. The house has Flemish curves upon its eaves. Its doorways yearn for buckle-shoed young bloods. Smoking clay pipes with lace a-droop from sleeves. Moonlight on terraces is like a story told by sleepy link boys' round old sedan chairs in days when tulip bulbs were gold. Carolina Chanson.
You're going to love this one. Needs a little TLC, but the neighborhood is impeccable.
Foster Collins of Cooper River Realty sounded genuinely enthused. Sarah looked around. The cobblestone street was picturesque in the late afternoon light. If not for the cars parked here and there, she could almost think she had gone back to colonial times. She held a flyer that read, "Historic property with established gardens. Desirable SOB location only 3 blocks from the Battery. Don't miss out on an opportunity to own a piece of history. Shown by appointment only."
What is an SOB location?
Foster read the flyer and laughed.
Not what you're probably thinking. It means south of Broad, which is traditionally a very good area of town.
Oh. Sarah peered through the leaves. This was the 5th house she had seen today, and one of the very few that fell into her price range. Almost hidden by overgrown shrubs, the narrow structure was easy to overlook. Crumbling stone steps led directly from the street up to a small front door. And that tree.
Do you know what kind of tree that is?
A rowan. It's supposed to be as old as the house.
And how old is that?
She removed her sunglasses and looked up at the tree looming over the entrance, partially blocking the door.
The original building permit has never been found in public records. In some historical accounts of the city, there is specific mention of a house that survived the Great Fire of 1740, serving as a smithy on this spot, and based on that, I would estimate it's around 300 years old, but I doubt that's accurate.
A 300-year-old house? Some of the homes on this street could be described as mansions. This one nestled among them like a poor relation. Double porches with peeling, vine-choked Tuscan columns adorned the left side of the dwelling. Wicker chairs, stacked against the railing, looked moldy with age. Obviously neglected, but with good bones, the house seemed to beg pardon for its humble state. Several of the encircling trees sported green leaves even now in the deep of winter. The plink of a piano floated over from the red brick house next door, reminding her of the piano she had just sold. When she thought of all the money she had flushed keeping it tuned over the years, hindsight is 20/20. This was her second day in Charleston, the city her mother had spoken of so longingly from military postings in Japan and Europe. Sarah's soldier father's career had taken them around much of the world, but, lovely as it was, her mother always reminisced wistfully about this southern coastal town. Yesterday had been Sunday, and despite the rain, she'd walked the cobblestone streets along with the other tourists and listened to the church bells tolling, apt in the Holy City, as the tour guide called it. She was already succumbing to the dilapidated charm of its shady, overgrown lanes and gated side yards, in which fountains splashed unseen behind oleander and magnolia. This street was a little more tucked away than some, and she hadn't come across it in yesterday's ramblings.
Ready to see the inside?
Sure. You're right about the neighborhood. It's fantastic. I'm just a little worried about the repairs needed on a 300-year-old house.
There have been several renovations over the years, obviously, and some rooms are more up to date than others. I'm not saying you won't have to make some changes, but you'll find that reflected in the price. I promise you it's worth a look."
He opened the quaint, arched front door to which traces of bright blue paint still clung. The foyer they stepped into was small and square, with a central staircase rising to the second floor.
The house is what is known as a single and was the most common building style before the Revolution. Most of the rooms on this floor are to the right of the hallway. The first room on the right would have been called the parlor. The next room you see is wired for an overhead light, so it was probably used as a dining room at some point. The tall ceilings are characteristic of Charleston houses. They allow heat to rise.
The parlor boasted a classic Adam fireplace and mantel surrounded by a beautifully paneled wall. Trash filled the dirty hearth, and 2 grime-encrusted fire dogs rested against the back bricks. White-painted wainscoting and heavy crown molding adorned both rooms and continued up the staircase. 2 pictures, roughly the same size, hung face to the wall in the foyer. Sarah tried to turn one around and found it nailed fast. She looked at Foster, who shrugged.
Not sure what happened there, but you can pull the nails out with a hammer and the hole should be an easy patch job. You can see that the electrical conduits run along the outside of the walls. Not everyone likes that, but I find it charming, and it does accentuate the age of the house. Also, I forgot to tell you that everything in the house conveys, so what you see here is all yours."
He made a grand, sweeping gesture as if to encompass vast riches, and Sarah suppressed a laugh. Behind the foyer, 2 steps down led to a small, barely functional kitchen with an old range, only one of the electric eyes worked, green laminate countertops, and what could truly be termed an icebox languishing off by itself near a door that led to the yard. The floor, however, was marble, gouged and scratched, but still marble. The larger creamy squares were broken up with small blue squares set in a diamond pattern. Their steps echoed on the old oak floors, and the stair treads creaked when they mounted the curving staircase to the second floor. Some previous owner had carpeted the steps, and the ancient stained carpet bunched and sagged like the diseased pelt of a very old animal. The mahogany banister felt as smooth as silk under her hand. The house's 1 bathroom at the top of the stairs was one of the more up-to-date rooms in the house, but decorated in a horrible 70s brown and orange color scheme. There were 2 bedrooms on this floor. One, slightly larger, looked out over the overgrown garden on the side of the house. A door in the smaller one opened to a closet staircase leading to an attic crammed full of bits and pieces left behind by previous residents.
You can see there's room for expansion. It wouldn't take much more than a little insulation and drywall to turn this into a game room or a bedroom, whatever you want. I would have all this, he gestured at the items covering most of the floor, hauled away by a professional junk removal company.
She was non-committal. She didn't have the money to have anything professionally removed. Maybe she could sell some of the stuff on eBay.
Are the bedroom floors the same wood used downstairs? They look different. Often these old houses were built with different woods, depending on what was available. I think the floors upstairs are cherry and maybe another fruit wood. The floor downstairs is oak in all the rooms except for the kitchen, of course. The painted wainscot in that paneled wall is anyone's guess as to wood type. Maybe you can tell from the grain if it's still visible. I don't have that level of expertise.
His phone buzzed, and he excused himself to take the call and went outside. Heading for the small, grime-coated attic window, Sarah accidentally kicked over a half-full duffel bag. The contents spilled across the floor. Hurriedly gathering everything up and stuffing it back in the bag, she was surprised to find a wallet containing a driver's license and credit cards. The expiration date on the license was March 1989. The bag also contained a gray, moldy toothbrush and several unposted letters. She opened one at random.
"And they're always here now. Yesterday, when I came home from work, they were all waiting, all 4 of them, in front of the hedge in the back. I'm leaving as soon as I can, but I'm trying to get my deposit back. That bastard at the rental office is stonewalling me. I'm not crazy, and I think he knows more than he's telling." She put it back in the duffel with the wallet. Obviously an unhappy tenant. Odd that he would leave his wallet behind. She distinctively heard a child crying, and she looked out of the window but saw no one. Going back down to the second floor, Sarah paced the larger of the two rooms, mentally placing furniture. The bed could be any size she wanted. She had sold the lit matrimonial when she realized the extent of her husband's betrayal. There was no closet. She supposed she could have one built, but it would make the room smaller. A small side window set in a dormer had a built-in seat with drawers beneath it. French windows led to an antiquated side porch that needed paint, but would be a nice place for morning coffee. She glimpsed a plank swing moving gently back and forth underneath a giant oak, and she inhaled deeply, feeling engulfed in a sea of green leaves. Sleeping in this bedroom would feel like sleeping in a treehouse. The moist, fragrant air and the buzzing of invisible insects all around were soothing. A bird flew past the railing, landed near her feet, and then took off again, seeming almost comically alarmed at her presence. She heard the sound of the piano again, and then a door slammed. A little girl waved to her from the porch of the house next door, and Sarah waved back. She saw the realtor standing next to her ancient Volvo. She had coaxed it along most of the drive down and sent up thanks each time it started. Outside, Foster finished his phone call. He caught glimpses of his customer at windows as she moved through the house. She had been tight-lipped from the start. Most clients would at least tell you where they were moving from, but not this one. When asked, she just said, "Up north," and then inquired about property tax rates. However, the Northeast was in her voice and on her car tags. "Hello?" He looked up. She called down from the side porch. "I'm going down to have a look at the basement." The basement was gloomy, with rickety wooden stairs. An overwhelming smell of putrefaction hit them as soon as they opened the door. They descended the steps, and Foster found the source of the odor. A cat had somehow gotten in but had not been able to get back out. The desiccated, marmalade-striped body lay under the egress window. She caught just a glimpse before Foster found an old coal scoop and took the remains outside. "I'm so sorry about that. I usually try to pre-inspect a house before I show it, but with the holidays—" He wiped his hands on his pants and trailed off, hoping she hadn't seen the body too closely. Poor cat. Odd that with neighbors on either side no one heard it. I can't imagine it starved to death quietly. Foster shrugged. From the way the neck swung when he scooped it up, it was obvious that it hadn't starved to death. Someone or something had snapped its neck. The floor was actual stone, not concrete, and housed a drainage system and sump pump, since wet basements were not unusual in Charleston during a heavy rain. This one seemed drier than some she had seen. The washer and dryer connections were down here. An old oil furnace filled most of one corner with odd cylinders and elbow joints lying scattered about. She rapped the side, and a bolt fell to the floor. "If you're interested in the house, you should probably have that looked at by an HVAC company and adjust your offer accordingly." "That's the heat, right? Has the house ever had air conditioning?" "If it did, there would have been window units that someone took with them when they left. The current owner has always rented it out and hasn't bothered to upgrade much. I don't think he has had a tenant in a while." How receptive would he be to a lowball offer? Foster thought this one over. She didn't need to know the house had been on and off their books for nearly 10 years, and that tenants never stayed more than a few months, if that long. If this were his house, he would jump on the first chance to get rid of it. Anyone likely to buy it would have to be from out of town and not have heard the stories, and this cautious cutie was an ideal candidate.
Moreover, if certain dark rumors were disregarded, it was a bargain.
Make an offer if you're interested. The worst they can do is say no.
I'll have to think about it. How soon could I take possession?
I would think immediately, since it's empty, but you never know until you ask. Do you have furniture and storage, or is it en route from...
I don't have a lot of furniture, so I'll probably be looking for some pieces here. She sidestepped that inquiry.
Unless you're uber rich, avoid King Street. They have some great pieces, of course, but you will pay through the nose. So, would you like to sit down and write an offer?
She laughed at his eagerness, and he realized she was younger than he had first thought. Early 30s tops. Give me a day or so. I have some things to sort out, but I promise I'll let you know by Friday. Of course, I'll need to have a home inspection company check it out. Foster was elated. If he could close this sale, he would exceed his quota for the month and get a white elephant off the firm's books to boot. He could usually tell when someone was going to make an offer, but she had a good poker face. He bent down to retie his shoe so she wouldn't see his excitement. She wasn't going to tell him yet, but she had already decided. This house, broken, neglected, and in need of repair, was something she could make beautiful again. This rain-drenched, green plot of land was going to be her new home. Chapter 2. In the days and hours of Saturn, thou canst perform experiments to summon souls from Hades, but only of those who have died a natural death. Clavicula Salomonis. The sun shone on cobblestones still wet from an early morning rain as small brown birds flitted from tree to tree. Sarah stood in front of the parlor window, happily surveying her new property. When the owner accepted her offer within hours, 2 weeks ago, she asked for approval to move in early, offering to pay a nightly rate, but he refused, leaving her stuck in the hotel. So, after the closing yesterday evening, she came straight over here with the few things she had, camping out on the floor. She slept badly, hearing thumps in the walls and soft scratching sounds at the bedroom window. The home inspector hadn't seen any evidence of a pest problem, but maybe she needed to call an exterminator anyway. A quick shower this morning revitalized her, and she decided to tackle the yard while she waited for the furniture she bought last week to arrive. A used furniture store out on Maybank Highway yielded some bargains, and she was now the proud owner of a washer and dryer, a mahogany rice-carved 4-poster bed with matching chest, and a flame-stitch fabric sofa she was told was a Chippendale reproduction.
That fabric ain't been fashionable since 1985, but it is sure in good shape.
The proprietor, an elderly but very spry gentleman named Frederick March, told her. He kept up a running commentary as he walked with her around his 2-story shop that was once a feed store.
That old woman that owned it lived on John's Island, out near the deep water, in a house her daddy built for her and her sister. The sister died right after they moved in, but the old woman stayed there 40 years by herself. She had one of the first air conditioners on the island, and she kept that place so cold. I ain't never seen furniture so well preserved, like it was in a freezer. Now that bed, that might have come from down near Beaufort, but I can't remember for sure.
She arranged to have the items delivered the day after the closing and paid in cash. Thinking about it, she now wished she had thought to buy some end tables. Her lamps were currently on the floor. At least she would have something to sit on and sleep in. This morning, the garden called her outside, and she responded eagerly, wearing old jeans, a socks cap, one of Sean's old flannel shirts, and no makeup. Trimming back an enormous hydrangea revealed 2 ancient gateposts, marking the beginning of a stone pathway in the yard, as well as a rusting wrought iron fence bordering the yard closest to the street.
Those are probably tabby, you know.
She turned around. A very nicely dressed man standing on the sidewalk in front of her house nodded to her. She must look confused because he repeated himself.
"Your gatepost there. The mortar holding the brick together is mixed tabby."
"What is tabby? Are you telling me someone killed a cat and mixed it with the mortar?" He laughed.
Tabby is a type of construction mortar. The early settlers burned oyster shells to create lime and mixed it with local sand to make a sort of concrete that's all over historic parts of the city. It's still used sometimes, but we make it with Portland cement now, so it's more durable.
He smiled warmly.
I'm Noble Connolly, and I'm full of useless information about tabby posts and other subjects. My wife and I live in the white money pit down the street, and we heard a Yankee bought the house. You didn't waste any time moving in, did you?
It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Sarah Faust, and no, there wasn't time to waste. The hotels around here do a thriving business, and there was no more room for me after the 11th. I was able to negotiate a quick closing, and here I am. She removed her work gloves, reached across the post to shake his hand, and felt something sharp pierce the soft flesh of her forearm. Blood dripped onto the post, and she looked in dismay at an inch-long gash in her arm.
"Oh, my dear, I should have warned you. Here, let me help."
Noble pulled out a handkerchief — who carried handkerchiefs anymore — and wrapped it around the cut.
Traditionally, we cover tabby structures with plaster because the oyster shell fragments are so sharp, you see. The plaster has worn completely off these. I'm not surprised, considering how old they probably are. There, I think it's stopped now.
Thanks. I'm going in to run some water over it, but, again, it was a pleasure to meet you, and I look forward to meeting your wife. I hope to have the garden tamed and a little more presentable soon.
That tree is going to eat your door. Are you going to have a landscaper in, or...?
Oh, no, I like to do my own gardening. She crossed her fingers behind her back as she lied. She had never gardened in her life, but she certainly could not afford a landscaper, and planned to wing it and hope for the best. The tree is on my short list. I don't have a chainsaw yet, so...
I have one. I'm on my way to my office, but I'll drop by this evening and bring the chainsaw if you like.
Really? That is so kind of you.
It's nothing. See you later this evening.
He waved and was gone. She was touched by his kindness. On the other hand, maybe the tree was something everyone in the neighborhood wanted gone. She couldn't blame them. She started for the house to take care of her arm and remembered she didn't have any Band-Aids. One more thing for the list she had not started yet. Might as well do it now. Milk, Band-Aids, coffee. Walking through the main floor, she added floor wax and window cleaner. Upstairs, she wrote bathroom cleaner, shelf paper, and... She jumped back. Some kind of spray to kill the millipedes that just ran under the baseboard. She started wiping down the shelves in the minuscule linen closet, then made herself stop. Focus. There was so much to do, and she could not keep jumping from task to task without finishing anything. Back outside, she hauled the hydrangea branches over to a corner in the back of the lot. The brick wall here must have collapsed in the rains of the past few days. She stumbled on bricks and slipped in the mud that had spread onto the grass. Stacking the old bricks in a neat pile, she heard a metallic clang. Under a heavy clump of vines was a bronze head, somewhat sunken in the ground and still covered with mud. The large, heavy-browed skull sported ugly, twisted horns. Pan, maybe? She scraped more of the mud away. It had none of the puckish charm usually associated with Pan, and instead looked deformed and brutish. She dug at the ground around it, clearing away spongy, decaying clumps of leaves, and revealing goat-like legs with cloven hooves. Someone had fastened a crudely fashioned, heavy iron collar with inverted, nasty-looking spikes around the squat neck. Sarah instinctively reached out to try to remove it, but when she touched it, it felt oddly warm. She sat back on her heels. This was a mystery, but a house...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?